The sergeant hadn't even shouted yet, but fear was already audible in their breathing. Boots slammed against the ground, desert dust rose in a burning cloud, and the Nevada heat struck every face like a slap. The recruits formed a trembling line under the midday sun. At the end of the tarmac, an olive-green bus screeched to a halt. The door opened. A figure descended slowly, without hesitation. A woman. "Look at that," someone muttered. "A girl here?" Before the words faded, Sergeant Cole Maddox's voice thundered. Silence. The silence fell thick and tense. The woman stepped forward a few paces. Her uniform still bore the folds of transport. No rank, no insignia. Her bag on her shoulder, her gray eyes fixed straight ahead. Nothing arrogant, nothing submissive either. "No," barked Maddox. "All away, Grace." The sergeant squinted behind his black glasses. His mouth twisted into a crooked smile. "Another administrative mistake, I suppose. They're sending us secretaries now. You at least know how to type." Nervous laughter broke out. Grace didn't answer. Her silence irritated Maddox more than any insolence. "When I speak, you answer, recruit." "Yes, Sergeant." That neutral tone, perfectly controlled, sent a shiver of unease through the troop. The man stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "You ever served before?" "Yes, Sergeant." "Where?" "In a library?" The laughter grew louder. Grace stood still, her eyes straight ahead, as if every word slid off her. "We'll see how long that attitude lasts. Here, we sweat, we bleed, we obey. Understood?" "Yes, Sergeant." "Then wipe that look off your face. From now on, you're nobody." The sun struck harder. The heat rippled in the air. Maddox gestured to the recruits. "Endurance run, 10 miles. Let's see who drops first." Boots pounded the track. The dust formed a thick brown veil that stuck to the skin. Grace ran in the middle, steady, her breathing even. Around her, men gasped, cursed, stumbled. She didn't. Her face remained impassive, focused. "Look at her," someone puffed between breaths. "She thinks she's better. She'll fall. Give her 2 more miles." But 2 miles became 4, then 6. The sergeant watched, arms crossed, his brow furrowed. The recruit he meant to humiliate was moving forward, relentless. Her pace didn't falter. Dust clung to her cheeks, but her eyes stayed sharp. "Harper!" Maddox shouted, getting her name wrong. She didn't turn. "Allo!" She sped up at the finish line. Most of the others collapsed, twisting in the dust. Grace remained standing. Her breath was short, but her gaze calm. Maddox approached, the veins in his neck bulging. "You think you're impressing me? You think running means serving?" "No, Sergeant." "Then what is serving?" She looked at him for a fraction of a second. "To endure." The word fell, heavy, dry, almost inaudible. But it echoed in the silence. The laughter died. Maddox clenched his fists. 50 push-ups for everyone. You can thank her." The recruits groaned and dropped to the ground. The sergeant walked away, satisfied. Grace placed her hands in the burning dust. Her body tensed. Her muscles screamed, but she didn't slow down. Every movement was precise, mechanical. Around her, men gave up, panting. She continued to the last one. Later, in the mess hall, the air was thick with the smell of metal and sweat. Conversations still whispered her name. "Did you see her?" Not a word, not a complaint. "Yeah, but she'll crack eventually. Maddox will break her." Grace ate slowly, alone, her back straight. The noise around her faded. In her mind, one thought remained: never respond to provocation, never give them what they expect. Outside, the sun sank over the red hills. Recruits laughed near the hangar. She cleaned her rifle methodically, her movements slow, precise. The metal caught the orange light. A voice behind her, "Aren't you ashamed?" She turned. A young soldier, mocking face. "You made everyone run. Proud of yourself?" She put her weapon away without answering. "You know, you won't get special treatment here just because you're pretty." Her gray eyes settled on him, calm. "I'm not looking for special treatment. Just to do my job." The boy said nothing. That flat tone, that absence of anger, cut short any retort. He looked away, embarrassed. That night, the base fell asleep in the sticky heat. But in the dormitory, one light was still on. Grace, sitting on her bed, was writing a few words in a black notebook. Not complaints, not memories, numbers, sequences, calculations. In the silence, she reviewed protocols no one here understood anymore: network security, cryptography, incident management. She hadn't forgotten who she was before this disciplinary assignment. The sergeant thought he had tamed her. He had no idea what he had awakened. At dawn, the whistle pierced the air. "Fallen," shouted Maddox. The recruits stumbled out, still groggy. Grace was already ready. Her uniform immaculate, her boots polished, her hair tied back. "You think you survived yesterday? Today, you'll crawl." An almost invisible smile crossed her face. She liked that word, crawl. Because before you can walk, you have to know how to endure the dust. Morning opened on a copper sky. The air already smelled of hot dust, sweat, metal. The recruits formed their ranks, faces still marked by the fatigue of the day before. Sergeant Maddox walked down the line with a heavy step, his whistle knocking against his chest. "Today," he growled, "I want to see who still has a bit of pride left, because from what I saw yesterday, half of you should be dancing ballet." Laughter broke out. He slowly turned toward Grace. "And you, Holloway, still holding up?" "Yes, Sergeant." "Good. You're going to do me a favor. Show everyone what your discipline is worth." Glances crossed among the recruits. Some snickered, others held their breath. Maddox gestured toward the hangar. "The training vehicles are covered in dust. You'll clean them on your knees, one by one." "Alone, Sergeant." Grace's neutral tone made him raise an eyebrow. "You have a problem with orders?" "No, Sergeant." "Then carry them out. And the rest of you, take note, that's hierarchy." The sun was already high when she took the bucket and brush and knelt before the first vehicle. The metal burned under her fingers, the dust stuck to her skin. Around her, the recruits had gathered, neither curious nor ashamed. "Holloway," someone shouted. "You missed a spot." Laughter broke out. She didn't react. Her movement remained steady, precise, like a metronome. Every motion calculated, every stroke controlled. Maddox watched, arms crossed. He waited for a sign, a complaint, a glance, a tremor. There was nothing. "Faster," he barked. "This isn't a spa." She quickened her pace without a word. Sweat ran down her neck, mixing with dust. Her knees struck the concrete, but her back stayed straight. The laughter faded. Silence fell, heavy, almost uncomfortable. Even the most mocking looked away. When she finished the first vehicle, Maddox stepped forward. "Not bad. You've got 9 more, and I want them to shine." "Yes, Sergeant." Hours passed, the light shifted, the heat grew heavier. Grace's hands were covered in open sores. She kept going, no groan, no slowing down. A young soldier, Thors, approached quietly, a rag in his hand. "Here," he said softly. "To help you." She looked up. "Put that away, soldier. I was given an order." He hesitated, then stepped back, ashamed. By late afternoon, the vehicles gleamed. The base seemed frozen in a strange stupor. Maddox approached, his shadow falling over her. "Finished?" "Yes, Sergeant." "Stand up straight." She straightened. Her face, reddened by the sun, remained impassive. "You think that makes you a soldier?" he asked harshly. "No, Sergeant." "Then why obey like a machine?" "Because a soldier obeys before explaining." The silence that followed was heavy. Maddox clenched his jaw. He wanted to shout, but couldn't find the strength. That evening in the mess hall, conversations were quieter. Her name was whispered like a warning. She lasted all day. The sergeant wanted to break her. He just ended up watching her. Grace ate slowly, her tray balanced on her knees, eyes lowered. Around her, the looks had changed, less contempt, more confusion. Later, alone in the hangar, she was still cleaning the brushes. The floor shone under the neon lights. Her hands barely trembled. She put the bucket away, closed the door, and stood still for a moment in the dimness. The smell of dust and metal filled the air. A voice rose behind her. "You don't have to endure this." She turned. A lieutenant, slim, in his 30s, watched her cautiously. "That sergeant, he's gone too far." "It's not a problem, Lieutenant." "It is one. You're not here to be a target." Grace inclined her head. "No. I'm here to serve." "That's different." She calmly walked past him and left the hangar. The night was hot, almost suffocating. In the sky, the stars trembled above the dark hills. She crossed the yard, her boots echoing on the hard ground. Behind her, the base still murmured with muffled conversations. In her room, she removed her gloves and examined her damaged palms. Then she took out her notebook. One line, no words, just a mark. Day 2, endure, always endure. The next day, Maddox found her already up before dawn. He frowned. "You didn't hear the signal?" "Yes, Sergeant." "And you're already ready?" "Yes, Sergeant." He leaned closer, his face just inches from hers. "You think you're challenging me?" "My sergeant, I'm preparing." He froze, as if trying to detect a trace of irony in her words. There was none, only a glacial clarity. "Very well, Hollow. Today we'll see if your endurance has limits." That morning, the recruits ran farther, crawled lower, under heavier glass. Grace held steady, her uniform coated with dust, her arms scratched by barbed wire. Maddox watched, jaw tight. Every order, every insult bounced off her without effect, and the more he pushed, the more his authority cracked. Soldiers like Moss began to understand that there was nothing to break in her, because she had already rebuilt herself elsewhere before coming here. At dusk, as the sky turned orange, he ordered, "Clean the firing range." "On your knees." She simply nodded. "Yes, Sergeant." She obeyed methodically. The ground still vibrated from training shots. The dust was slowly settling. She scrubbed again and again. Maddox walked away, but a young soldier murmured, "That's not normal. She doesn't feel anything." Another replied, "Maybe she feels everything, and that's the worst part." When the bell rang at the end of the day, the base was silent, and in that silence, a myth began to form. On the third day, the heat struck earlier than usual. By 5, the air already shimmered as if testing those who dared to breathe it. In the yard, the ranks formed slowly, faces drawn, movements heavy. Maddox advanced with steady steps, his shadow sliding over the recruits like a silent threat. "Today," he barked, "we'll see who can still walk straight." His gaze stopped on Grace. "You, Hollow. Front." She stepped forward without a word. The sergeant gave the order. The exercise began, load carrying, running, crawling under barbed wire. The sand was burning, the stones cut into skin. The soldiers groaned, cursed, fell. Grace maintained each movement precise, each breath measured. She didn't try to go faster, only to never stop. "Lower," shouted Maddox. "Crawl like snakes, not tourists." A gust of sand whipped her face. She barely blinked. Her arms trembled, but her rhythm stayed steady. Next to her, Torres collapsed. She caught his arm without a word, dragged him a few feet to the shade of a wall, then resumed her crawl. Maddox saw the gesture. He whistled. "No pity here, Holloway. You think this is a charity?" "No, Sergeant." "Then move." She obeyed without explanation. The hours stretched on, the sun hammered the helmets like a mallet. The air smelled of hot metal and burning flesh. Boots sank into the dry sand. Hands slid through dust. Maddox moved between the lines, shouting, watching, waiting for a crack. But there was none. Hollow never fell. By noon, he ordered the final test. Those still standing, climbed the rope tower. 20 meters. Not a single misstep. The wind rose, whipping up swirls of sand. Grace grabbed the rope, her fingers cut, her arms shaking. She climbed slowly, methodically, her eyes never leaving the top. The others slipped, fell, cursed. She didn't. When she reached the platform, she stopped. Her palms were bleeding, her breath heavy. Below, Madoc stared. For the first time, he didn't shout. She descended, her step steady, her face unreadable. When she touched the ground, the soldiers didn't laugh. No one dared. A strange fatigue had settled over them. That afternoon, they resumed weapons training. The bursts of machine gun fire tore through the air. Orders flew. Grace, focused, aligned each shot with cold precision. The targets fell one after another, steady, clean. Maddox passed behind her, looking at the series of perfectly grouped holes. He said nothing, just a slight movement of his jaw, as if something inside him were cracking. During the break, Torres approached. "Why do you keep going, Holloway? It's like nothing touches you." "Everything touches," she replied, "just not in the same place." He froze, unable to answer. When night fell, the base was bathed in the red light of the desert. Maddox gathered the troops. "Rest for tonight, except you, Hollow. Armory cleanup." In the hangar, the light flickered. The smell of oil, iron, and gunpowder filled the air. She disassembled the rifles one by one, her hands bandaged, her movements precise despite the pain. Outside at that moment, Maddox was speaking with another instructor. "She drives me crazy. She doesn't bend. Maybe she's not here to bend. Everyone bends eventually." He fell silent. For a moment, his gaze drifted across the empty yard, as if searching for an answer he didn't want to admit. In the hangar, Grace closed the last magazine. Her hands barely trembled. She stored the rifle, shut the crate, and stood still, facing the open door. The desert wind came in, lifting a veil of dust. She thought of the general's voice during her reassignment. "You'll have no allies, only one mission, endure." She breathed in slowly. The pain, the fatigue, the insults, all piled up layer after layer without ever cracking her. Endurance wasn't a stance, it was her very breath. Outside, the evening siren wailed. The recruits returned to the dorms, weak laughter, slow movements. Maddox watched from a distance, arms crossed. His face, usually hard, held a new shade, hesitation. He knew she wouldn't last forever, but he was beginning to doubt one thing. What if it was he, in the end, who was starting to bend? In the silence of the night, Grace wrote again in her notebook, no words this time, only a line, a perfect circle, closed, unbroken. She hadn't triumphed, only lasted. The night fell like a lid. Across the base, the floodlights carved squares of light into the dust, and the desert wind slipped between the barracks with a dry hiss. The others had been asleep for hours. Grace never really slept. Sitting on the edge of her bed, she watched the flickering lamp above the door. Her hands rested calmly on her knees, but her fingers moved slightly, as if still calculating. She took out her black notebook. The pages were covered in numbers, diagrams, binary sequences drawn by hand. No sentences, no visible emotion, only logic. She reread the last line, Omega sequence. Priority, silence. Then she closed the notebook and put on her jacket. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. She crossed the silent courtyard, passed between the hangars, avoiding the pools of light. Her steps were precise, measured, almost military, but without rigidity. She moved like someone who had learned to blend into the background. She entered the computer maintenance room, a small, half-forgotten building where terminals slept under gray covers. She pulled the sheet from an old mainframe. Dust rose in a dry puff. She plugged in a cable and switched on the screen. Lines of code began to scroll slowly, like a forgotten language. Her fingers slid over the keyboard with mechanical speed. In the blue light, her face looked harder, less submissive, sharper. A sound made the lamp flicker. "Who's there?" The voice was low, hesitant. "Torres." He held the door slightly open, one hand on the frame. "You never sleep?" "No need." "What are you doing?" "I'm checking the security systems. At this hour, it's the only time no one asks questions." He stepped closer, curious, peering at the screen. "That's military code." It was. Now it's just encrypted silence. Torres frowned. "You were an analyst, weren't you?" She didn't answer. Her fingers kept typing. He stood there for a few seconds, fascinated. "You're not like us," he murmured. She shut down the terminal. Yes, I am. I've just seen what lies behind the orders, and that's not something you forget. Then she added quietly. Go to bed, soldier. Tomorrow will be worse. When he left, she remained alone in the blue light. For a second, her face softened. A memory returned, of a white room filled with screens, of men's voices speaking too loudly. Washington, 2 years earlier. A glass office, perfect uniforms, cold hands. You contradicted a superior, Captain Hollow. You were relieved of duty, immediate reassignment. She had tried to warn them of an intrusion risk, a dormant virus in the tactical network. They had laughed. A brilliant paranoiac, one had said. And now here she was, in the middle of the desert, relearning sweat and dust. She drew a deep breath. The past was nothing more than a silent engine. She shut down the terminal, replaced the cover, and stepped out into the night. The moon faintly lit the yard. Between the shadows, Maddox was also walking alone, a cigarette at the corner of his lips. He didn't see her right away. When their eyes met, he flinched slightly. You never sleep, do you, Hollow? No, Sergeant. He took a drag, exhaled smoke through his nose. You think I don't see your game? I don't think anything, Sergeant. I work. Work on what, humiliating me? She held his gaze, showing no emotion. I'm trying to understand why a man like you needs to humiliate others to exist. A silence. Then he let out a dry laugh. You're more dangerous than I thought. Only to those who confuse authority with fear. He dropped his cigarette, let the ember die in the sand. Careful, Hollow. The base doesn't like people who are too smart. Nor the weak ones, Sergeant. They stood face to face for a few seconds, then he turned on his heel. When she returned to the dormitory, the wind had risen. The metal sheets vibrated softly, like a heavy breath. She sat on her bed, placed her boots back in their exact position. Everything had to be in order. Always. Before turning off the lamp, she took out her notebook and added a single thin line, almost invisible. Observation, he's starting to doubt. She set the pen down and closed her eyes. Sleep didn't come, but that didn't matter. The night wasn't an enemy, it was her territory. Outside, the headlights of a truck swept across the yard, then disappeared into the dust. In the absolute silence, she thought of something an instructor had once told her, those who learn to survive in darkness no longer fear the light. She barely smiled. Dawn would soon rise, bringing with it a new ordeal. But this time, she wouldn't be the only one resisting. Morning broke under a milky sky. A rare mist for Nevada clung to the hangars, veiling the base in deceptive calm. The sirens blared earlier than usual. In the corridors, whispers spread, general inspection. Soldiers hurriedly adjusted their uniforms, cleaned their weapons, checked the alignment of their boots. Orders crossed, voices collided. Maddox strode across the yard, impeccable, eyes gleaming with cold excitement. Today, he said, we'll show what Bravo section is worth. And believe me, I want silence, perfection, not a single button out of place. His gaze slid toward Grace. Especially you, Hollow. You'll be in the front row. If you embarrass me, you'll regret breathing. Yes, Sergeant. She was already putting her things away methodically without looking up. The others watched, uneasy. Everyone sensed that something was coming. Maddox hated inspections, but today he seemed to be waiting for it like a performance. At 9, the yard buzzed with activity. The vehicles stood in perfect rows, gleaming. The flags hung motionless. The staff officers hadn't yet arrived, but the tension was mounting. Maddox circled the formation, whistle between his fingers. When the general arrives, I want statues, not soldiers. And if anyone moves, they'll dig their own grave. He stopped abruptly in front of Grace. Did you polish your boots? Yes, Sergeant. We'll see. On your knees. She obeyed. He examined her shoes, pretending to find them dull. Not enough. Clean them here, now. She took a cloth from her pocket, bent down, and wiped slowly. The silence around her was absolute. The recruits looked away. At the end of the line, Torres clenched his jaw. Maddox crouched, voice low. You like obeying, huh? That all you know how to do? No, Sergeant. Then prove to me you can do more than crawl. She didn't answer. Her face stayed neutral, but her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from contained anger. When she was done, he straightened. Stand up. You're going to serve as my example. She came to attention. The rumble of an engine echoed in the distance. Stand ready. Maddox shouted. A convoy rolled into the base, flags snapping in the wind. General Rivka, accompanied by 2 officers, stepped out of the jeep. His imposing figure towered over the courtyard. Conversation stopped instantly. Sergeant Maddox, called Rives in a clear voice. General, welcome to Eagle Rock. Surprise inspection. Show me your section. Maddox gave a signal. The ranks straightened. The general walked slowly, examining each uniform, each weapon. Then he stopped in front of Grace. Name? Recruit Holloway, General. A brief silence. The general's gaze lingered on her face for a second, as if he recognized something, but he said nothing and continued walking. Maddox allowed himself a satisfied smile. When Rives finished the line, Maddox spoke up, his voice falsely confident. If you permit, General, I'd like to demonstrate the discipline of our recruits. Go ahead. Maddox turned to Grace. Hollow, on your knees. A murmur ran through the ranks. You're going to show everyone how to follow an order, even the simplest one. She didn't move. The general's gaze had frozen on them. Sergeant, Rives said slowly, I'm not sure I understand. Just an exercise, sir, to prove cohesion. He insisted, his hard eyes fixed on Grace still standing. Time seemed to suspend itself. The recruits held their breath. Grace slowly bent her knees, placing one hand on the ground. The humiliation burned, but her face remained expressionless. Rives took a step forward. Sergeant Maddox. Yes, General. Stand her up. Now. The tone left no room for reply. Maddox hesitated, turning slightly pale. Grace rose to her feet without a word. The general looked at her for a long moment, then turned to Maddox. So this is how you evaluate your troops, through submission? No, General, I. Silence fell. The officers began taking notes. The soldiers kept their eyes on the ground. Rives' voice cut through, firm. I've seen enough. Your section will be re-evaluated. And you, Sergeant, will speak again about your methods. He turned to Grace, giving her a small nod. Follow me, soldier. She obeyed without knowing why. They crossed the yard, eyes turning away as they passed. Maddox stood frozen, jaw tight. In the command office, Rives closed the door. Sit down, Hollow. She did. He studied her for a long moment. You don't remember me, do you? No, General. I was in Washington the day of your reassignment. I read your report on the dormant virus. She slowly raised her eyes. Then, you know. I know you were right, and I know why they sent you here. He paused. The base is getting a full systems audit tomorrow. I'll need your help. Officially, you'll remain a recruit. Unofficially, you'll work for me. Understood? Yes, General. He nodded. And Holloway, don't let anyone make you bend again. She saluted sharply and left the room. Outside, the wind had risen. Maddox saw her pass by. His face hardened. She said nothing, but this time, her gaze was no longer neutral. There was something new in it, something that warned the game had just changed. The next morning, the base awoke in an unusual silence. No shouting, no whistles. The air felt heavier, as if the desert itself were waiting. Soldiers whispered in low voices. The general was returning. Maddox, in an impeccable uniform, paced the yard like a caged animal. His clenched jaw betrayed his sleepless night. He hadn't forgotten the previous day, or the general's gaze, and least of all, Hollow's, calm, upright, unreadable. At precisely 8 o'clock, the siren blared. Form up, he shouted, his voice too loud. The recruits scrambled into formation. The heat was already rising, turning the dust into a mirror. Grace took her place without a word, face impassive. Her boots shone, her uniform perfectly set. Maddox took a few steps before her, his look sharp. Today, I'm going to prove that discipline still exists here. Yesterday, some of you forgot who's in charge. He paused, stepping closer. You got lucky, but luck runs out. Yes, Sergeant. We'll see about that. The rumble of engines signaled the arrival of General Rives. The jeep rolled to the center of the yard. Behind him came 2 officers and a military photographer. Maddox straightened, whistle in hand. Bravo section, at attention. Rives walked slowly along the ranks, observing tense faces and stiff shoulders. Then he stopped abruptly in front of Maddox. Sergeant, I want to witness a demonstration of command. Show me your method of instruction. Maddox gave a brief smile. With pleasure, General. He turned to face the troops. Today, we'll test cohesion and absolute obedience. When I give an order, it's carried out without question, even if it seems absurd. Understood? Yes, Sergeant. He took a step toward Grace. Hollow, step forward. On your knees. A brutal silence fell. The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. The general remained still. Maddox pressed, his voice harder. You heard the order, on your knees. Grace didn't move. Her gaze locked with Maddox's. The air vibrated with tension. Sergeant, Rives said calmly, let her stand. It's just an exercise, General. No. It's an humiliation. The words cracked like a gunshot. Maddox froze, unable to respond. Grace still didn't move. Her calm face seemed to be waiting for what came next. Rives stepped forward slowly. Recruit Holloway, attention. She straightened, the dust clinging to her knees. The general looked at her for a long time, then turned to the troops. You see this woman? You've been laughing for days, watching her like she's a mistake. You think she's here by accident. He paused. Well, let me correct that mistake. Maddox frowned, a flicker of unease in his eyes. Rives continued. Recruit Holloway isn't here to learn, she's here to evaluate. A murmur rippled through the ranks. She's an officer of the Strategic Cyber Defense Division, assigned to a confidential mission. Last night, she corrected a vulnerability in the security system that no one else had detected. Without her, your communications would still be exposed. The silence thickened. Maddox gave a nervous laugh. Wait, General, you mean that? Yes, Sergeant, that's exactly what I mean. Rives signaled to his aide, who handed him a sealed folder. The general opened it and took out an official order. By decision of command, Principal Engineer Grace Holloway is hereby appointed commander of Eagle Rock Base, effective immediately. No one moved. Not a breath. The words seemed to float in the unreal heat. Maddox stepped back. Commander, Rives said, turning toward him, you are relieved of duty, Sergeant. An internal investigation will review your methods. He turned to the soldiers. As for you, you've just learned the most valuable lesson of your careers. Never judge strength by appearance. He saluted. Grace returned it, sharp, precise. The general left the courtyard, leaving behind an almost sacred silence. Maddox stood motionless, staring at the ground. The recruits stayed rigid, unsure whether to salute or speak. Grace stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. At ease. The word cracked through the air. Shoulders loosened. Torres lowered his head, unable to meet her eyes. She walked slowly between the ranks, her boots leaving clear prints in the dust. It's not humiliation that makes a soldier, she said simply. It's mastery. Then she looked up at Maddox. And yours, Sergeant, has just ended. He tried to respond, but no sound came out. She turned on her heel and walked away. The wind rose, lifting a golden cloud. The soldiers watched her go in silence. That day, the base understood, it was the end of one reign and the beginning of another. By midday, the news had spread. In the corridors, the workshops, the firing range, the same quiet, incredulous murmur returned. She's the new commander. No one laughed. No one dared. The base, usually loud, moved as if on eggshells. Steps were shorter, voices lower. Even the wind seemed to hesitate to pass. In the main office, the blinds filtered a hard light onto the wall and the still American flag. Grace stood, hands clasped behind her back. In front of her, General Rives was signing the final papers. It's official, he said, closing the folder. From now on, Eagle Rock is under your command. Thank you, General. It's not thanks I'm waiting for, Hollow. What you're about to do here will upset more than a few sergeants. I know. Because you'll get no leniency, and there's no room for error. He handed her a metal badge engraved with her name. Commander Grace Holloway. Take the keys to the base, and make something of it that's worth the effort. She saluted sharply, then stepped out. Outside, the light blinded her for a second. Faces turned toward her, some fearful, some curious. The lined-up recruits hesitated between saluting and disbelief. Grace stopped at the center of the courtyard. Assemble, she said simply. Voices echoed, footsteps gathered. In less than 2 minutes, Bravo's section was back in formation as the day before. Maddox stood at the back, out of uniform, temporarily suspended. His face was expressionless, but his eyes burned. Grace took a few steps forward. Yesterday, you saw what hierarchy is. Today, you'll learn what command means. A murmur rippled through the ranks. Command, she continued, is not the volume of a voice, nor the size of an ego. It's the responsibility of silence. If you serve me, you'll serve discipline. If you challenge me, you'll serve as an example. Her tone was neither harsh nor cold, just clear. Every word fell with the weight of an order. Those who still believe that strength is imposed through fear can step out of line now. No one moved. Not a breath. She nodded. Then we start from zero. She turned to Torres. Soldier, how long does it take you to calibrate a thermal sight? 3 minutes, Commander. Too long. You'll do it in 2. She pointed to another. You, network maintenance. Check every cable, every line of code. Any suspicious echo, I want to know before it repeats. The orders followed one after another, precise, rational. Nothing spectacular, just a machine coming back to life. From afar, Maddox watched, expressionless. His authority had evaporated, replaced by a void he didn't know how to fill. Before leaving, Rives approached him. You wanted to lead through fear. Look at what fear produces, silence, the kind that obeys without respect. Maddox clenched his fists. She won't last. That's what they said in Washington, the general replied calmly. And yet, here she is. The general's jeep drove off in the dust. The base stood still for a moment, suspended between 2 eras. Then Grace's voice rang out, clear. Back to work. The men scattered into the hangar. The sound of tools returned. On the field, drills resumed. Order was reborn, methodical, without shouting. Later, in the quiet of her new office, Grace looked over the stacked folders, maintenance reports, firing statistics, physical evaluations. Everything smelled of fatigue and disarray. She sat down, opened the first file, drew a red line in the margin. Start with the system, she murmured. Always the system. A shadow appeared in the doorway. Maddox. He stepped in slowly, without saluting. You've won, he said in a low voice. I wasn't at war, Sergeant. If you were, maybe you didn't know it, but you were. She looked up. And you, now? I'm not staying for you. For the base. Then work, and leave your grudges outside. He stood still for a moment, then nodded. You're tougher than me. No, just more patient. He left without a word. She remained alone, her gaze fixed on the flag hanging on the wall. The fabric shifted slightly in the faint draft. In the courtyard, the soldiers carried out her orders without hesitation. The rhythm had changed, fewer shouts, more precise gestures. A quiet, exact order was settling in, like a new collective breath. That evening, she climbed the watchtower. The desert stretched endlessly, bathed in a reddish light. Below, the base looked like an organism finding its pulse again. She took out her notebook and wrote a single line. Repairing begins with unlearning. Below, a voice called out. Commander, main system report, stability at 97%. Continue, she replied simply. She closed her notebook and rested her hand on the railing. The evening wind still carried the scent of burnt sand, but for the first time in a long while, the dust felt lighter. 3 weeks passed. The desert itself did not change. Always the same white sky, the same dust, the same heat that crushed the earth. But at Eagle Rock, something had shifted. Fear no longer set the pace, nor did the sergeants' voices mark the day. It was something else, calmer, more precise. Under Grace Holloway's leadership, the base had changed tone. Shouts had disappeared. Orders circulated quietly, clearly, executed without delay. Reports came in every morning. Results improved. In the hangar, engines purred again. In the communications room, screens displayed stable signals. Even the mess hall seemed to breathe differently, less tension, more purposeful silence. One morning, Torres entered her office, a file in hand. "Commander, here's the maintenance report. Networks are 100% secure, and reaction times have improved by 27%. Good. Keep it up." He hesitated before leaving. "Commander, I wanted to thank you for what you've done with this place." She looked up without smiling. "Don't thank me, soldier. Thank the silence. It's what teaches you to listen." Torres was unable to respond otherwise. In the courtyard, training resumed, but no man shouted at another. Teams jumped without orders, evaluated themselves, corrected mistakes together. Maddox, reinstated on Grace's orders, now supervised physical exercises. He spoke almost no more, his gaze softened. One day, he crossed paths with Grace near the firing range. "I received the performance report," he said. "They're improving. They're learning. You're right. Shouting tires more than it teaches. Respect, on the other hand, never runs out." He remained silent for a moment. "I didn't think I could still learn." "Everyone can, Sergeant, even those who thought they already knew everything." She walked away, leaving behind a lighter air. In the administrative offices, she had replaced flashy slogans with a single phrase engraved on a steel plaque. "Strength does not shout, it acts." Every soldier read it upon entering, and no one commented. But the looks on their faces said enough. Days followed, orderly, almost serene. Officers from other bases came to observe the new organization and took notes. "How did you achieve this?" one commander asked. "By removing the noise," Grace replied. "The rest comes on its own." At night, she patrolled the perimeter, not to control, but to listen, the hum of machines, the soldiers breathing, the collective machinery. She noted everything mentally, what squeaked, what worked, what breathed. She did not seek to be loved, only understood. One night, while checking the generators, she found Maddox outside, holding a cup of coffee. "You never sleep?" he asked. "Not yet. You know, at first I hated you." "I know. And now? Now, I listen to you." He froze, surprised, then nodded. "You've earned their respect. And mine." "It's not a victory," she said. "It's a construction. Every day, it could collapse." She looked at the sleeping base. "Respect, Sergeant, is like system security. You think it's stable until someone forgets to check it." They stood a moment, watching the hangar lights. The wind lifted small whirls of sand that vanished instantly. The next day, she gathered the whole section. "Starting today," she said, "each soldier will take 15 minutes daily to train another, not to command, but to teach." Thor raised his hand. "Even the youngest?" "Especially them." "And you, Commander, who trains you?" She paused almost imperceptibly. "Silence and my mistakes." In the following days, this rule further transformed the base. Soldiers became instructors for one another. Hierarchies flattened. Rigor became shared. Visiting officers watched, fascinated. "This is the first base where no one shouts," one murmured. "Maybe the first where people listen," replied another. One evening, Grace received a confidential message from Central Command. General Rives wrote, "You've made Eagle Rock a model. What you've built is worth more than statistics. Keep going. And remember, true authority is not imposed. It is embodied." She reread the sentence twice, then filed the letter. In her black notebook, she calmly wrote, "Day 34, the noise recedes." She closed the notebook, stood, and went out to the office terrace. The night was clear, the wind gentle. The base lights formed a perfect grid. She stood straight, arms crossed, gaze lost toward the horizon. In the desert, silence stretched as far as the eye could see, and for the first time, it did not weigh, it breathed. A year later, the desert had not changed. Always the same wind, the same dust, the same silence weighing on the hills. But at Eagle Rock, everything had a different rhythm. New arrivals no longer heard the shouts they had been warned about. They entered an orderly base where every step seemed measured. On the gate, a freshly polished metal plaque bore an engraved inscription, "Strength does not shout. It acts." CDT Grace Hollow. Each recruit read it upon entering, without needing explanation. It had become a silent ritual. In the main courtyard, a young soldier wiped his brow after training. "Looks like she's still watching," he said, pointing toward the command building. His comrade replied, "She doesn't need to be here for you to feel her." "Did you know her?" "No, but everything here speaks of her. The schedules, the methods, the way of being silent." The two stood for a moment, observing the base bathed in light. The sound of tools, the brief orders, the perfect coordination, all seemed to flow with calm precision. In the main office, a new officer, Captain Sloan, leafed through the old records. Grace's reports were meticulous, written in fine, almost geometric handwriting. Not a word too many. Each page bore the same clear signature, J. Hollow. Sloan closed the file thoughtfully. "She didn't just command," he murmured. "She rewrote the very way obedience works." A knock at the door, Thor entered, now a lieutenant. "You wanted to see me, Captain?" "Yes." "I hear you served under Holloway until her departure." "Yes." "What was she like?" Thor smiled faintly. "Hard to describe. She spoke little, but when she said a word, everyone heard it." "Did you respect her?" "No." "You respected her before you even understood why." Sloan nodded slowly. "And why did she leave?" "She was assigned to Strategic Command in Washington. They say she trains officers now." He paused. "But truly, she never really left here." The captain looked out the window. Outside, soldiers trained silently under a sharp sun. Everything seemed in place, perfectly coordinated. At night, the base was bathed in red light. The wind gently blew across the flags. Thor patrolled as she had taught him, each step steady, each gaze attentive. He passed in front of the wall of honors. At its center, a new frame, a photo of Grace Holloway. Uniform impeccable, gaze straight. No smile, no pause. Under the photo, a handwritten phrase from one of her reports, commanding is first about knowing how to listen to silence. Torres stood still for a moment. Behind him, two young recruits stopped as well, instinctively. "Is that her?" asked Delan. "Yes." "They say she was tough." "No, just fair." The boys exchanged a glance and then resumed marching, a little straighter. Later, in the calm of night, Captain Sloan wrote his monthly report. Eagle Rock Base maintains exceptional efficiency. No major disciplinary incidents. New recruits integrate on average 40% faster. The Hollow model works. So it was not a myth, it was a method. He set down his pen, stood, and went out onto the terrace. The sky was clear, star-strewn. The wind carried the smell of hot metal and dry earth. He found himself murmuring, "Wherever you are, Commander, you've left an echo here." Hundreds of miles away, in a glass building in Washington, Grace Holloway observed the sleeping city from her office. The lights of the screens reflected in her eyes. On the wall, a map of military bases, network diagrams, alert lines. She took a file stamped Eagle Rock and carefully placed it in an archive box. A colonel entered and saluted. "Your work continues to set the standard, Commander." "It's not my work, Colonel. It's theirs." She closed the box. "I only learned to listen to them." When she left the office, the city was quiet. On the sidewalk, a group of young soldiers recognized her, hesitant. "Commander Hollow," they said. She turned. A slight nod. "Yes, we're going to Eagle Rock tomorrow. Any advice?" She thought for a second. "Don't try to be the strongest. Be the fairest." She shook their hands and walked away. Under the streetlights, her steps remained straight, measured, silent. And in that silence, everything still seemed to breathe of her, discipline, patience, quiet strength. At Eagle Rock, the wind lifted a little dust on the entrance plaque. The engraved letters gleamed in the moonlight, "Strength does not shout, it acts."